Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene the summit. And today, what a day it is to kickstart a debate. And joining us is Emily Schrader, political commentator and CEO of Socialite Creative, attorney Bario, Yoshafat, political commentator and legal expert, and Yariv Oppenheimer, member of the Emirates Executive Committee and project director of the two-state coalition at the Geneva Initiative. Thank you all so very much for joining us on this post-election shindig. And it's official, the election hangover is over too, so it's time to take a deep breath and try to have a better understanding of what exactly happened, what is happening now, perhaps most importantly, what is next for Israel. So let's take a closer look and pick up the conversation right after.
Israel's fifth election in 4 years has come to a close, and whilst there are still some votes to be counted, it is clear who the winners and the losers are. Benjamin Netanyahu has a clear path to a Knesset majority, featuring a coalition of right-wing parties, paving the path for a third stint as Prime Minister. But arguably the biggest story out of this election is the rise of the far-right religious Zionism party, who will now have the third highest representation in Parliament. This may lead to high-level ministerial roles for the controversial politicians Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Elsewhere, whilst Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid made strong gains, the rest of his coalition crashed, with the left-wing Meretz currently under the threshold needed for Knesset representation. So was this more of a victory for Netanyahu's bloc or a loss for Lapid's bloc? What will be the role of the religious Zionism party in this government? How will these results affect Israel's relationship with the rest of the Middle East and the world? What's next for Israel?
Okay, so let's get to it. What is next for Israel? Let's use this 30-second quick fire round for each of us to, just put it out there, get it out of the system, and then we dive into the details, if you will. So, Emily Schrader, take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
So I think that, first of all, thanks for hosting me. Again, happy to be here. I think that when it comes to the coalition that's being formed, there's a few things that need to happen. Obviously, it's not finalized, but we can reasonably assume that it's going to be Netanyahu with the further right parties. As such, I think it's really important that internally Israel, first of all, above all, stops the terrorist attacks. There's been an increase in waves in recent months. That has to stop. Somebody has to do something. But in addition to that, it's incumbent upon Netanyahu to ensure that in the international community, that the agenda, the extremist agenda of Ben-Gvir isn't pursued. It isn't something this government is active about.
Interesting to take a look domestically and internationally at the very same time. Attorney Bario Yoshafat, your take?
First of all, I agree 100% with Emily, like 100%. Second of all, I think that maybe in the legal aspects, I think that a lot of people in Israel are not happy with the legal system in Israel as it is right now, the checks and balances that we have. And lastly, and this might surprise you, I think that they're going to try and work on the discourse, because I know that 50% of the Israelis are feeling like the country is going to become Iran, which I think it's a ridiculous fear. But we need to work on that and make sure that people feel welcome even though they lost in the elections.
Yeah, the winner's strength is being measured by its treatment vis-a-vis the losing side. And we'll get to all of this in a second. But last and definitely not least, Mr. Yariv Oppenheimer, your take?
Yeah, first of all, we need to remember it wasn't a landslide for Netanyahu bloc, because when you look at the popular votes, it's a 50-50. The problem was the split in the parties, the left-wing parties and the Arab parties. Without this split, we were in a different situation. Having said that, we still have the most right-wing, religious, conservative coalition we ever had. That the first goal of this coalition is to change the system of law, or actually to create a situation in which no one can stop the majority from taking the rights of the minority. This is the meaning of making the Supreme Court much weaker. And this is a huge challenge for Israeli democracy.
Okay, and from this point onwards, please feel free to interact. I'm looking forward to your interaction, dear panelist. And Ran, I can see you smiling there, listening to Yariv, but I would like to begin with a hindsight and asking, I can predict that your answer will be both, but try to stay with me there. Was it more of a victory for Netanyahu or a loss for Lapid?
So I want to say something. Yariv Oppenheimer is correct in the fact that just a few thousand more votes and Meretz would have passed the threshold and the coalitions would be different. But Meretz and Labor together would not have reached over 8, maybe 9 seats. It means that the Israeli public does not want the left. Okay, they're willing to be called center. I know what's really the difference. They don't want to be called left. Yariv has moved more to the left, even though he says the reality is moved more to the left. The Israeli public is not pro that. That's number one. Number two, it's not really a question of right wing. I'm not sure that the Shas party is so right wing. They supported the Oslo Accords. They're socialists. The question is, who won? The people who are very concerned about their Jewish identity and the safety of the Jewish people in Israel, or people who are more universalistic and they're more open to different expressions and different types of Judaism? And I think that's the main question. And I just want to emphasize one thing. To argue that the people who are on the right or with the Netanyahu bloc don't care about minority rights is a joke. I think that one of the reasons why Smotrich and Ben Gvir have received so much power is because there are people in Israel that feel that they're not being seen. They're being attacked. They're being rocks are being thrown at them. People in South Tel Aviv are being raped, and people don't report it. They're being ignored, and that's why they won. That's why they said, okay, we're done with this. This government has ignored us. They're the minority.
I agree that there is a feeling that the state doesn't do enough in order to deal with crime, and especially among the Arab citizens of Israel. But this is only part of the picture. And when this coalition is aiming to weaken the Supreme Court, the meaning of that is that tomorrow morning, if there will be laws, for example, immunity to soldiers that are going to make atrocities against Palestinians, this is a violation of human rights. And once the Supreme Court will be weak, no one will be able to stop such a law. And this is a promise of Ben Gvir party. So yes, there is a huge challenge for the Israeli democracy because some of the parties within the coalition that are very strong doesn't believe in democracy as we know it. And democracy is not just the will of the people. It's also the rights of the minorities, even people that are not citizens like the Palestinians.
But some, including Emily Schrader, I suspect, would argue there's also the right of the majority. And at the moment, we're seeing almost daily terror attacks in different parts of Israel. And this is the ticket, if you will, that the Religious Zionism Party have been vying for during the campaign. And we can see the Israeli public nodding in approval. Right, Emily?
Right. So I don't think that the primary question here was the question of Jewish identity or what type of Jewish identity. I think that is an issue in Israel that's important to many voters for the Religious Zionism Party. But I think that the reason they were so successful is because of the security threats that they felt were not being taken seriously. I do agree that many people feel they're not being seen when it comes to being under threat. But at the same time, I also completely reject that the Israeli public doesn't want to be defined as left or center left. If we look at the actual total number of votes, the vast majority of the country is center or maybe center right. Taking those parties, Likud, Yesh Atid, and Hamachaneh Mamlechti, just those three parties are 77 or 78, depending on which count you're looking at currently, of the total mandates for the parliament. Now, that's a vast majority.
But Likud,
in fact, it's a minority. It's a minority who are voting for either the religious parties or the religious Zionism. The problem here is the blocks, as Yariv mentioned, that the question within Israel has become pro-Netanyahu or anti-Netanyahu. And unfortunately, we see a lot of political ego from everyone's side, and Netanyahu unwilling to work with the other parties and form a coalition that actually represents what the people have voted for.
And in this respect,
I think that people that are voting for Likud in the current situation, Likud is not a center party. It's a very right-wing, and it's become much more religious, much more committed to the settlers and to the Orthodox religious. You cannot call it a center party. Maybe Benny Gantz's party is a center party. Lapid went to the left, and also it's hard to call the Yesh Atid today a center party, and this is why Meretz lost so many votes, not for Likud or the Arab party, but mostly for Lapid, because Lapid become much more to the left. The only center
Correct,
party
but you
that we can
can't
talk about
categorize
today
Likud as
is
being
Benny
far
Gantz.
right wing when you have religious Zionism and the same thing. Of course, Netanyahu is in conversations with them, and that's concerning, but that's a separate issue. Likud as a party is not a far right party, even if it's shifted to the right in recent years. When you talk about the Likud platform and the Likud history and what its values actually are, you can't say that it's a far right party, and it's a party that's been proven to work with Yesh Atid and other parties as well throughout different governments. That can happen again, but I'm not sure that can happen with Netanyahu in the situation things are in today, which is very unfortunate. And by the way, it's not representative of what the people of Israel have said that they wanted, even in this election.
By the way, soon we will see that even Ben Gvir become not right-wing enough, and we will see people that criticize him that he is conservative. I can promise you that.
But speaking to that point, exactly, dear panelist, the path for a coalition for Netanyahu is quite clear, smooth sail, so to speak. But it will create a reality going just with the go-to coalition partners, the intuitive ones on the right. It will create a situation Netanyahu haven't been in a longer while, that he is the leftist mark, so to speak, in his coalition. Do you think that Netanyahu will now will try at least to extend his hand and to expand his future coalition, at least to get someone to his left, so he will not have to be the quote-unquote dove of this coalition?
Personally, I don't think so at all.
With the Likud, this is what has happened with the Likud many times, especially with Netanyahu. One of the reasons why we are in this turmoil of elections is because Naftali Bennett allegedly said he's going to be more right than the Likud. Because Netanyahu always goes first to the left, to Ehud Barak, to Tzipi Livni. That was his game. Also, people tend to forget the ultra-Orthodox were not in the government 3 times. One in 2003 under Sharon, then later under Netanyahu when Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid heads the Brothers Pact. And the third time was this government. Yeah. So the fact that the ultra-Orthodox are now going with Netanyahu, it's only because they understand they can get more, and again, because they were being ignored tremendously in this government. By the way, I just want to say, of course, in democracy, you need to worry about minorities, and you need to worry about individual freedoms, of course. But if you're ignoring the majority, then that's just tyranny, and I think sometimes people forget it. I do, however, disagree with Emily in the fact that I agree on the fact that most of the people are center-right, but I disagree with the fact that that's what the people wanted. I think that this, in theory, you could have had 2 tickets. One to say, I want the Netanyahu bloc, and the other ticket would be the anti-Netanyahu bloc. What I do think is a disgrace for the Zionist entity is that people are so concerned about Ben Gvir, but they were willing to allow Balad, a party that supports terrorists, they were willing to let it pass the threshold just so the blocks would change. I think that's a shame on the Zionist entity.
Yeah, 40 seconds left,
I think that there's a huge difference between, and I'm not defending it because I completely oppose Balad, but there's a difference between a party that has 4 mandates in the Knesset and a party that's the 3rd largest party in this election, whose members are so extreme that even the IDF wouldn't accept them. You can't just forget about that. There's a big difference between 14 mandates and 4 mandates. Both of them are unacceptable in my opinion.
It had 14,
and
13.
Balad is not a racist party. Balad believes that Israel should be a place for all citizens.
That's debatable.
Literally, they do not. They disagree the concept of Israel as a Jewish state.
I can't accept that.
And on that note, we will be taking a very short break now, but as you can see and hear, we have so much more to unpack. So Emily Schrader, Yariv Oppenheimer, and Bario Yoshafat are staying with us, and so should you. A quick break, and we're back with the summit.